What's up, YouTube? It's Adam Grover from Grover Boys Racing. I made some videos in the past about nitrous tuning. Probably see it on my channel, or some of you might have seen it. But the other day, I watched a video and it kind of got me a little upset, a little disappointed, because I watch these guys once in a while, and they got a TV show. They're well known. They're up here, and a guy like me is down there. And these guys are pretty smart guys. They got some fast stuff. So I was actually a little taken back and surprised, along with being disappointed. Now, we're all drag racers for the most part. If you're tuning into this video, you're either looking at how to put nitrous on a car, or you're into nitrous cars, or whatever the case may be, or you're looking to go fast, whatever. Drag racing. All of us want free horsepower, especially if it's reliable horsepower. We want that extra, even if it's one, we want it, if it's reliable. When you start making 2 horsepower and you're starting to rattle the piston and, stuff like that, then you dial it back. You don't want that. We want reliability, longevity, and we want to make power as much as possible without hurting stuff. Especially if you're going to enter races and shootouts and things like that. You want to be able to make that back-to-back pass and know that you're not going to have problems. Maybe you got to put a plug in here and there if you're, like to live life on the dangerous side or something. But your nitrous guys that know anything, you're going to be checking the plugs probably after every pass just to make sure you're still good. That all being said, I watched a video the other day, and like I said before, I was taken back and surprised, disappointed, the whole nine. Because these guys, long story short, small block, stroker, heads, cam, intake, nitrous kit. Believe it was a cheater plate kit because they said it maxed out at 250. So, doesn't really matter what kit it is. But I just want you guys to know so that way when I say 250 shot and it's maxed out, you guys understand that even with a bigger jet in it, that particular plate isn't going to necessarily flow any more nitrous because your orifice size is maxed out, what it can flow at that point with that particular jet in it that they give you, the biggest one for a 250 shot. So, these guys put the 250 in, they spray it, makes good power, picks up, 200 horse or 225 horse, I can't remember what it was. Might have even been 250. Honestly, I don't care what it picked up, and here's why. The tune-up was left rich at the end of the video. First time they sprayed it, it was like a 9.5 air-fuel ratio. So they're like, well, we got the biggest jets in it. Only thing we could do is take away from the fuel. Okay, makes sense. I ain't mad at you for that. That's exactly what you should do. They spray it again. And it's at like 10.8. Around there. It picked up 10 horsepower from the time they sprayed it to the time they shut it down. All usable horsepower across the board. And their words were, yeah, we see this a lot. It doesn't really pick up much. Doesn't pick up much. It just picked up, by 1 point, it picked up 10 horsepower. Now, who's to say that the next point it doesn't pick up 10 horsepower? Or it does? I don't care if it didn't. Because at this point, leaning that out is going to make the tune-up safer. Because you want your tune-up to be what it is naturally aspirated. So if you're a 12.8 NA, when you spray it, you want to be a 12.8. Me personally, I've ran 13.1 on motor, and then on nitrous I do richen it up just a hair. So I'll be like a 12.8, 12.9. Like roughly 2 points in the air-fuel ratio. And that's just because I like stuff a little bit on the richer side, even though with nitrous, leaner is theoretically safer because nitrous is an oxidizer and it tries to burn that fuel. But when you're too rich, especially if you're in like the 11s even, it's going to blow some of that out the exhaust, but the rest that it doesn't burn is leaking past your rings into the bottom end. So now that fuel is in your oil, which in turn is going to start to eat bearings. So let's say you're at a shootout and you're spraying your car. You got 64 car field or something crazy and you're spraying this thing. Some guys might change the oil. A guy like me will not, because it's not something I'm trying to do at the track unless I really have to. But chances are an average guy isn't going to change his oil. You're going to be busy checking plugs. There's a lot of stuff that you need to do before you make an oil change on the car, at least in my mind. If you're running an event, whether it's no prep, NHRA sanctioned, whatever it might be, other than like a drag and drive, because then you're putting some mileage on the car. Probably a good idea to change your oil and something like that. But if you're going to the track even making test and tune passes, you're not going to be like, well, I made 4 passes, now I need to change my oil. Nobody wants to do that. Not when you got to check plugs every single pass. There's other maintenance involved that you're going to be trying to do with the nitrous that needs to be done. That's more important than making an oil change because you're too rich. But this video, telling people that you can just spray the car, yeah, it didn't pick up much power, so whatever. Nah. You're going to have people blowing stuff up. They're going to blame nitrous oxide for it. They're going to say, oh, nitrous is bad. I blew my motor up. It detonated. Meanwhile, you're way too rich. Yeah, it ate the bearings out of that motor. Or, yeah, I nipped the piston, broke a ring. Whatever the case may be. Because when you're too rich like that, it does damage. Too rich is just as bad as too lean, if not worse. When you start getting in a 9 air-fuel, 10 air-fuel ratio range, it's bad. It's not good. Not where you want to be on spray. Not on pump gas or C16 or any of those type of fuels. So that was like the biggest thing they did. One of the smaller things they did was bottle pressure. It didn't pick up nothing on the engine dyno by putting the proper pressure in the bottle. Now I can't say why it didn't, or if it picked up like 2 horsepower. It was something minuscule. It wasn't that much. But I've personally seen a car on a chassis dyno make like another 50 wheel horsepower off of like 100 or 200 pounds of bottle pressure. Going from like 750 to like 900, 950. Like it woke up. Like I was like, holy crap, bottle pressure can do that? Because I was younger at the time. And that's after I've had nitrous car. I didn't realize it was 50 horsepower. I felt it hit in my car, but I didn't realize it was like 50 horsepower to the tire type of difference off of a bottle pressure. And that depends on your tune-up and all that. Your bottle pressure has to be right there with everything else. Like you got to tune on that bottle pressure. If you're making a pass on nitrous and you're at 750, theoretically you're going to richen up the kit because it's not spraying as much nitrous, not forcing as much nitrous through the plate. Where if you're spraying 950, it's got more pressure to push that nitrous into it harder. So it gives you that hit. Also, you're forcing more nitrous through the plate. Now, when the plate's maxed out, maybe that's why it didn't pick up much, because your plate's already maxed out. That could have been why they necessarily didn't pick up too much from bottle pressure. But it was just some stuff that I caught that a lot of people are going to watch. I don't know how many views that video had. I'm sure it's well in the if maybe even hundred thousands. But I know for a fact it's probably tens of thousands because these guys are they're popular guys, they're smart guys, which that's why I was so blown away because I'm like, this isn't like a guy like me in my garage doing this. This is people who have TV shows and big YouTube channels, and really they should know better at this point in their career. And I feel bad. I'm not trying to pick them apart, but it was just really an eye opener where it's like, okay, I watch these guys to learn myself, to try to learn, and I have learned some stuff from them, and it's like, well, not this time. Too much stuff on that. And who knows, maybe they tried it behind the scenes and saw what it picked up by taking even more jet. Maybe they were scared to blow it up. Maybe they didn't realize it. I don't know what the case or thinking behind it was. Yeah, it didn't pick up much, so we're just going to stop right here. We leaned it out. It's still pig rich, but go ahead, guys. Spray your stuff. Let it be rich and have fun. And that, especially 10 safe horsepower. I mean, I know I might be stressing this out. It sounds like a broken record, but it's like, let that really sink in. Like, if that was my tuner and I took my car somewhere and I made another 10 horsepower and the tuner was like, yeah, we pulled 10 horsepower out of it. The guys did a decent job, but it was really rich. We leaned it out. It's safer now, and we made 10 horsepower across the whole entire RPM band. Usable horsepower. You're going to feel that. 10 horsepower from 3,000 RPM all the way across the board, that's going to show up on a slip. Because it's 10 usable horse. It's not like it peaked an extra 10. It's all the way across. Now, I'm not going to say it's going to be like a kick in the butt, like, wow, this thing's a rocket. But you're going to see it somewhere in the slip, whether it be a mile an hour, whatever the case may be, it's going to show up. I can almost guarantee you that. When it's across the whole band like that, the car's going to go faster. Unless you're making like 1,000+ horsepower. This is the type of motor you put in a car and it runs in the 9s, 10s. A lot of guys would probably go bottom 10s with this motor in their car into the 9s with it tuned like that, and then you pick up the 10 horsepower, it's only going to pick up maybe half a tenth to a tenth, but that's still enough to edge somebody out. That's 10 horsepower that the guy next to you might not have. And who's to say that it's not 20 or 30 horsepower? If you spray a car, for reference, let's say you make 250 horsepower on motor. You spray a 250 shot, and it makes 470 horsepower, and it's pig rich, 470. You're going to go, I didn't pick up what I was supposed to. Now, there's a lot of variables here. Camshaft, cylinder heads, all of it plays a role in what you're going to pick up from nitrous. As you can see with my Blazer, if you go back, I sprayed it with a 100 shot, I sprayed it with a 250 shot. It ran the same time because the cam in it and stuff, with the timing, all that, the whole setup, it wasn't built for that much nitrous. So you can only get away with so much in something like that. But let's say you make 470 horsepower, you sprayed a 250 shot, and you're pig rich. That right there tells me maybe I can make 500. So let's start dialing it back. We're going to pull jet out of the fuel side. We might even pull fuel pressure out at this point if I don't want to pull the jet. So we're going to reflow the kit. If we're at 7 or 7.5, we're going to take it down 1 full pound and see how it does. And then we're going to see where we're at. And then if we're still too rich, then we're going to start pulling jet out because you need the volume there behind it. I like running 7 pounds of fuel pressure, personally. So I would probably pull the jet and leave the 7 pounds. But either way, they go hand in hand. Fuel pressure with the jet, vice versa. There's not necessarily a wrong way. As long as you get the air fuel where it needs to be, you don't have any super rich spikes, where then it drops back down and leans back out, because you're always going to have something. Line length, all that stuff plays a role in all that, in your nitrous or fuel spike, when it spikes up real rich and then leans back out. It's nitrous. It's really, your line length will play a role in that and everything. If it's not set up right, it's going to be worse than somebody who has it set up right. And that doesn't necessarily make you a bad tuner. It's just you got to learn what works and what don't. That's me personally. I like looking at the whole thing, if I can, and try to get that tune up as clean as possible from the time I hit the button, which is right off the gate, to the time I shut it down, which is right at the finish line, or right after the finish line, I should say. I'll usually run it past, whether it's eighth or quarter. You stay in it an extra 10 or 20 feet. So for me, that's what I'm looking at. It's what I'm looking for. I'm trying to figure out how to get that thing where it makes as much power without killing it. So if I can get that thing down to a 12.8 air fuel and pick up maybe 30 horse from a 9.5, because you got to figure that's 3 points. So if that's 10 horsepower per point, which I could actually see it being, it might even pick up more when you start to get closer to that Stoich level, because now it's like, okay, yeah, now we're starting to lean out here. I'm using what I got. I'm not pushing nothing past and down into the bottom. But who knows? Maybe this closer you get. It depends on the car. I know with the green car on motor, if I went 1 point on the air fuel ratio the other way, like from a 13.1 to a 13.2, the car slowed down. Like that's where it was at. And it slowed down like a half a tenth to a tenth. It was like, okay, back. And then when I was at like a 12.9, going to 13.1, that was about a tenth. So that tells me that's 10 horsepower. Right there. And that's on motor. That's a naturally aspirated setup. So on nitrous, it's roughly going to be the same way. But regardless the power that you're picking up, I don't care if it picked up nothing going from that 10.5 to the 12.5 or 12.8, just the Stoich level, because then you're going to make that the 10 that they already picked up, you leveled out, but now you're safe. Now you're not dumping fuel past your rings into the bottom end and needing bearings in 6 months to a year. The maintenance is going to go from a lot to half, if not more, because you're not going to be changing the oil as much. You're not going to be using as much fuel through the kit. There's a lot of positives to go from that 10.5 air fuel down to a Stoich level, regardless of power. You're keeping your engine together, saving money there in rebuilds. Bearings might not be much, but cylinder heads are. If you nip a plug or a piston and it torches the head because you got too much fuel, because that's what it would do if you have too much fuel on nitrous, especially when you're spraying big, like over 250, and you're too rich, you'll torch that head. You'll blow right through the head. What you see coming out the exhaust, those big flames that nitrous cars do, it's going to go right through the chamber. Right through the actual head. Don't believe me? Google it. Put in torched head from nitrous or something like that. I'm sure there's pictures online. I've seen them on Facebook here and there. People do it. You can do it with a turbo, a blower too. When you start making power and you start turning these things up, it's common stuff. When the tune-up, when something either goes wrong, when an injector hangs open, any of those issues. But nitrous car, it's a big problem. Because that nitrous, it likes fuel. That's why, like, the whole power thing, like, yeah, we don't see a big gain. Well, it likes fuel. So, like, nitrous might actually make a little bit more power, being a little bit more on the rich side. But obviously, when you're overloading it, it's not, because it's not using it. It's too much. So there's a point. Just like when you're tuning something NA or with a blower or turbo, it doesn't matter what it is, there's a point. Pretend that's a sweeping gauge. There's a point where it's like, okay, right here's where I want to be. That's too much. That's too much. Right here. I need to be dead center. Or that's too little. That's too much. Dead center. This one's just right. So just keep it in mind. And, you know, when you watch these guys, it's hard to tell you who to watch. You know, I mean, I'm an average guy in a garage that's cluttered. People call me a hillbilly and all this other stuff. I just got that comment because of the last video I did. And that's stuff I've heard my whole life. But I can say this. I might have took out a head gasket here and there. But I've never blew a bottom end while I was spraying something. Just grenaded it. I never torched a head. You know, the head gasket stuff was when I really tried to push the envelope. And that's, you know, and I did what I had to do to try to beat people because I was, at the end of the day, I had a crap setup trying to race people who had good stuff. So for me, it was worth it to try to push it. For some of you guys, it isn't. For me now, I can't say it isn't because I still got junk. You know, some of the stuff's decent, but it's still, at the end of the day, it's junk compared to what people have now. You know, it's all outdated technology. The stuff I got for the 55, Sportsman 2 heads from the 80s. They haven't made the aluminum casting since early 90s, late 80s. So that's what I'm working with. You know, stuff like that. And that's stuff I chose to buy, but it was cheap. So I'm just trying to have fun with what I got. But just try to be careful who you watch, who you listen to. You know, these guys, I feel like they should have knew a little bit better than to even a disclaimer like, yeah, you know, you don't want to run it too rich, but we're going to stop here because we don't feel like it would pick up more power. Something like that. But just to cut the video like, yep, we're done. That's it. Have fun. I really like nitrous because that's basically what they did. And it's just boggles my mind. So that pretty much sums up the video. I probably sound like a broken record to you guys, but it's just something that really I was taken back by, and I couldn't stress it enough that that air-fuel ratio is very important. And you guys, you don't want that thing too rich, especially if you're spraying nitrous. So that's how I'm going to sum this video up. Try to keep them air-fuel stoich. Right there, 12.8. If you want to start pushing it, you can go into 13s, but it all depends on the car and the setup, how efficient the chamber and everything is. Check your plugs, see how the plugs look. Just don't listen to the wideband. Check the plugs too, and go hand in hand. They're tools, and the plug's going to tell you what's going on in that engine, 110%. Plug will not be wrong. The gauge can be, the plug won't be. That being said, you guys have a good one. I'll catch you all later.